persons, unless you put a lift into a overhead bypass for pedestrians, people in wheelchairs and disabled people, find those very difficult.
Yeah, and that is true, and a lot of lifts would be expensive all over the place. So although that's a great idea from
And they have to
Ali,
be built at a certain height to get the trucks through.
but Ali's saying she's seen them overseas and in places like Australia, and there seems to be a proliferation of them there.
Yeah, and I think the more modern overhead gantry systems do have lifts, and there's certainly a great idea if you can, obviously if we can afford that sort of infrastructure.
Okay, but do we miss out on having pedestrian crossings on big wide roads where people can't just nip in and out of, not in and out of traffic, but nip across the road, and we don't need them around the middle of Blenheim where the traffic's very slow and the streets are narrow and you can just dash across if you want to? Is that a problem?
Well, getting across wide roads is a problem, and particularly for our elderly people. As I mentioned before, disabled persons, mums with prams, certainly, the slower walking demographic, those big wide roads, and that's what my research into my master's degree showed, that our slower walking demographic certainly did find it more difficult to cross the road. And that's even where we had traffic signals installed, on a minority of the demographic actually couldn't cross the road sufficient time before the red man flashing at the traffic signal.
Yeah, but a question about that, because the call has gone out, hasn't it, to speed up those lights and make them faster so that traffic can start flowing again. And do you slow it down for just one person, or do you actually speed up the whole process and hard luck to that person? That's obviously a difficult decision.
Yeah, well, the technology is available now where we can make our traffic signals smarter, where they can actually judge how fast a pedestrian is walking and obviously suit the pedestrian signalling timing for that particular pedestrian's walking speed.
That would be fantastic.
But what we trialled or what we had in Invercargill there was a system where pedestrians could actually choose a longer walking time at the pedestrian signal by holding the push button in for a period of 3 seconds. So, if we're thinking about our slow walking demographic as traffic engineers, there's certainly, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, nicely put. And thank you, Eddie. Eddie Cook on the panel. Well, there's a new phrase for the lexicon, the slower walking demographic.
Yeah.
We'll all be there. A lot of people
Some of us already are.
Yeah.
A lot of
Some
people
of us can't remember where the end of the driveway is.
Shut up.
And a number of people are reporting they're trying to draw cubes.
Oh, that's very cool.
And you've got them worried. Now, the ways we mangle language was brought up on the panel yesterday. It always brings in a huge mailbag. Can I quote some of the highlights just quickly? Inundated instead of inundated.
Yeah.
Pressurised and burglarised instead of pressured and burgled. He was pressurised by his friends. What? Did they put him in a can and seal it?
Yeah.
Harriet Blackman, Freeman's Bay. Any of your own favourites?
Well, we had one last night. Somebody described tender hooks as opposed to tender hooks as opposed to tenterhooks, which seemed a bit of an oxymoron. But the one that really bugs me, and it's not really that, is daylight. People call it daylight savings.
Yeah, they do.
And it's really annoying. It's daylight saving. It's not daylight savings. You can't package up an hour and stick it in a day, and I'll use that later. And the other one is Kawara, which is the Queenstown, which is the Kawara River, and they use Kawara, which is bizarre.
The one that gets me is performance, which I hear a lot, and that's because of the Americanised, they put R's in, so performance. So we, you hear journalists on the news saying performance, and also getting sank and...
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Donald Trump launches an airstrike on Syria following Tuesday's deadly chemical attack. We have extensive coverage from correspondents in Washington, in Istanbul, and true White House insiders. Also tonight, we're in Edgecombe. The PM has been there, and he is joining us too.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat in tēnei. An American defence official says the cruise missile strike against Syria this afternoon was a one-off and there are no current plans for escalation. The United States has taken its first direct military action against Syria and its leader Bashar al-Assad by firing missiles on a Syrian airbase. The US President Donald Trump says the strike is in direct retaliation for this week's chemical gas attack on civilians, which Western powers have blamed on the Assad regime. The BBC's John Campbell has the details.
From 2 US destroyers in the eastern Mediterranean, more than 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles were launched, all targeted on one airbase near Homs, where it's believed the chemical weapons attack on Idlib was launched 48 hours earlier. The missiles targeted the runway, the aircraft on the apron and in hangars, and fuel supply tanks. The president addressed the nation.
Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many.
Within 2 days of the attack, the US has reversed its view on President Assad, identified targets and struck.
John Campbell reporting. The Foreign Minister, Murray McCully, says the US has taken the unilateral action to try to prevent further chemical weapons attacks. Mr. McCully says it's clear the Syrian government carried out chemical strikes and without an adequate response from the United Nations Security Council, the New Zealand government understands the US action. But the Green Party is calling the US attack hasty and a threat to global security. The Greens Global Affairs spokesperson Kennedy Graham says the Greens expect cooler heads from global leaders and no wrong has ever been righted and no child protected by launching missiles. The Bay of Plenty town of Edgecombe remains cordoned off, but authorities hope they can begin pumping out floodwaters tomorrow morning. But the danger isn't over for people in nearby low-lying areas, with a warning more evacuations may be possible. Sarah Robson has more.
The Bay of Plenty Regional Council says they're hoping to finish work tonight repairing the stop bank which breached in Edgecombe. Once that's done, they can begin pumping floodwater from the town, a process which could take 2 weeks. Civil Defence says the floodwater in Edgecombe is likely to be contaminated with sewage, so clearance has to be provided by the Ministry of Health before people can be allowed back. The Regional Council says as the floodwaters move down rivers and canals, people in low-lying areas northwest of Edgecombe could still have to leave their homes. It's expected floodwaters could threaten those areas for another day or so. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
MPs are calling for gang members and prospects to be banned from owning guns. A parliamentary select committee has recommended the move after a year-long inquiry into the illegal possession of firearms. Its report, released this afternoon, says the unlawful use of firearms is a core part of the gang culture. The Labour MP Stuart Nash says people should lose the right to own a gun if they join a gang.
By and large, the gangs are the main perpetrators of criminal activity. We say if you want to own a firearm, get out of the gang. If they're keen hunters, they will have to make a choice on whether they want to remain in the gang or they want to remain a keen hunter.
Labour's police spokesperson Stuart Nash. The jury at the Andrew Little defamation trial has finished its deliberations for the day and will continue working towards a verdict on Monday. Mr Little is being sued in the High Court in Wellington by Earl and Lani Hageman, the owners of the Scenic Hotel Group. They say Mr Little defamed them in statements he made linking a resort deal awarded to their company with a large donation they made to the National Party. However, Mr Little said he was doing his duty as opposition leader and holding the government to account. Justice Clark summed up for the jury this morning, and it has so far been deliberating for about 6.5 hours. Jurors returned to the courtroom twice this afternoon to ask questions. It's 5:04. To sport and self-belief was the key to American golfer Charlie Hoffman's remarkable opening round at the US Masters. The 40-year-old Hoffman shot a 7-under par 65 in a windswept first round at Augusta, finishing 4 shots clear of compatriot William McGirt and 5 ahead of England's Lee Westwood. Hoffman says he can only describe the round as a dream.
A few weeks back, I sort of sat back on a week off and asked some people what I needed to do better and asked myself what I needed to do better, and I just needed to believe a little bit more. And I think I'm just starting to believe. This game's tough. I'm starting to believe, and obviously seeing putts go in and seeing shots where you want them to go helps the belief process a little bit.
Charlie Hoffman. There'll be no subtlety in the New South Wales Waratahs' approach in tonight's Super Rugby match against the Hurricanes in Wellington. With no Australian side having beaten a New Zealand team this season, the Hurricanes will be chasing a bonus point win to stay in touch with the pace-setting Chiefs and Crusaders. The Hurricanes coach, Chris Boyd, says there'll be no secret to the Waratahs' game plan.
2015 they came here and gave us a pasting at home, and they were particularly tough on us physically, and they are a very big side and they're very physical, and I'm sure they'll try and dominate us again, and that's just something that we'll need to circumvent.
Chris Boyd. The defender Ellie Riley has been named as the new captain of the New Zealand women's football team. The 29-year-old American-born New Zealander who made her debut for the Football Ferns in 2009 replaces Abby Erceg, who retired from international football last month. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a mixtape from the jazz drummer Anthony Donaldson. Country Life visits Yarp and Sue Van Dorsa. Guardians of the Araho stream as it flows into Lake Rotorua. And Bruce Maunzel speaks from the Timber Trail Lodge, about to open for its first paying guests deep in the middle of nowhere, which will go nicely with a sonic tonic dedicated to huts and other backcountry accommodation. So take shelter on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Waikato and Coromandel Peninsula. Showers gradually clearing from the south today and becoming fine. However, a few showers returning north of Whangaparaoa tomorrow. Waitomo to Kapiti Coast, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, a few showers developing about Gisborne and the Wairoa district tomorrow. Wellington and Wairarapa, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from some areas of cloud this evening and tomorrow morning. Canterbury mainly fine, however cloud and patchy drizzle this evening and tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland fine apart from showers about southern Bulla and northern Westland tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers spreading north this afternoon, then becoming mainly fine. The Chatham Islands showers clearing tomorrow. It is 8 minutes past 5 or 7 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
On Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
Donald Trump, earlier this afternoon, 2 US warships, the USS Porter and the USS Ross, have fired a total of 59 Tomahawk missiles at the Syrian government airbase where US officials have claimed the warplanes that carried out the chemical attacks that killed dozens of civilians earlier this week were based. Coming up tonight on Checkpoint, we're in Edgecombe and we feature striking interviews with people there who've lost everything or who don't know what they've lost. We also have pictures from our crew there, and don't forget, you can watch us on Freeview Channel 50, Facebook, the RNZ website, and from Monday, you'll be able to watch us on Sky Channel 83. But first tonight, the BBC's North American editor is John Sopel, whose work we regularly feature on Checkpoint, of course. Just hours before the US strike on Syria, he told late-night BBC viewers in the UK that they may wake to find Trump had taken such action. Well, they're about to wake and they'll find he was right. We grabbed John Sopel very quickly just after the strikes were announced as he raced to file for the BBC on what had happened and why.
Well, I think what we have seen is one of the most dramatic about turns in foreign policy that I have ever witnessed, because until a month ago, it seemed that President Trump viewed the Assad regime as perhaps a useful tool in the fight against so-called Islamic State. Then that all changed with the hideous images that came out of Idlib after the chemical weapons attack. Not only has there been such an extraordinary swift change of policy, I have never seen such action so swiftly. So what we have seen now is that within 48 hours of the attack, we have seen US foreign policy turn 180 degrees. And we have also seen the president order his national security advisors to find targets and to strike. And more than 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles have been fired against Syria. There are so many questions that we simply don't know the answer to. Is this a one-off attack against one particular airfield where the raid was launched from, or is this the start of something else? And that we don't know.
Now, John, I know you have to go, but what's fascinating about this is it's so at odds, as you say, with his position very, very recently, his strong and strident attacks on Obama in 2013, saying, keep out of Syria. And the overwhelming temptation is to say he's trying to change the subject here, that he is under so much pressure that he needs a circuit breaker. Could he be doing the right thing for the right reason, or is something else at play here?
Well, I think that is too conspiratorial, too glib, that he's launched 50 or 60 Tomahawk cruise missiles just to change the subject. I think you don't do that. And I think what we have seen is a professionalization of the national security apparatus. I also think that one of the things you're seeing is the battle that is being played out within this administration between the people who are isolationists and the people who are globalists, the nationalists and the internationalists, those who think it's America first and those who think that America has a vital part to play in the rest of the world. And I think that if you were to judge on the results, you'd say, well, the internationalists at the moment seem to have the upper hand on the basis of what has unfolded overnight in these dramatic news coming out of Syria with the attack on this airbase. So I think that it is more about the president. He said in his news conference on the White House lawn with the King of Jordan, one of the things that he liked about himself, one of the things I like about myself is that I'm flexible. And I kind of thought, where is this going? And now we see where it was going. The flexibility, I said on the TV news last night, I think that there is now a strong probability, that there will be some kind of military action. In 24 hours, my view changed completely so that I felt confident enough to say on the TV, you know what, I think it's a betting certainty, and it wouldn't surprise me if British people wake up tomorrow and find there has been a raid overnight. There was.
The BBC's John Sopel. Mohammed Leela is CNN's correspondent in Istanbul. Now, clearly, Turkey and the Assad regime have had a relationship of mistrust and varying degrees of enmity, although somewhat less of late. But Turkey has relationships of varying complexity with almost everyone, Russia and the US too, obviously. So what's been the reaction in Turkey to the US strike?
Well, it's still very early in Turkey here in Istanbul. People are going to be waking up to this news, but I think it's fairly easy to predict that Turkey will be very pleased with these latest U.S. strikes on this military base in Syria. You have to remember that for years now, Turkey has been calling on the United States to set up some sort of no-fly zone to help in the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. Under the previous U.S. administration, that was something that they refused to do. President Obama refused to get involved in any sort of meaningful way in Syria, and that was much to the consternation of the Turkish leadership, as well as many of the other Gulf countries who really wanted America to be doing more. So I think we're going to wake up to a region that's going to be, first of all, surprised at the airstrikes, but surprised in a very pleasant way and happy that the United States is finally doing something. Now, in the same breath, just as you have countries in the region that will be happy about this, you also have the various militant groups on the ground that will be celebrating this as well. For example, there's a group called Ahrar Asham, which is one of the major militant fighting groups on the ground right now in Syria. They are a Salafi group, largely believed to be backed by Saudi Arabia. They have a very hardline interpretation of Islam. They're the ones that would, for example, stone people to death or cut off their hands if they're caught stealing in Syria. Well, they're also celebrating what's going on. And you have to imagine that ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria will also be celebrating what's going on. As a colleague of mine at CNN pointed out in his analysis, and I think it's quite correct, he said America now runs the risk of acting as ISIS's air force in Syria. And that's how I think some people will interpret this. Certainly Syria Iran and Russia might interpret it that way.
Yes, they are very, very strange bedfellows, aren't they, Donald Trump and those parties? And this is such an about-face on Trump's previous position. Is there a sense there of why this is happening? Is it too cynical of me to suggest that there may be reasons other than Trump and the Pentagon and the people that Trump is talking to being genuinely outraged by this chemical weapons attack?
Well, look, in speaking with diplomats with the U.S. State Department in the region, the one message that I was getting consistently since Trump was inaugurated was that nobody knew what to expect. And the word that people often used sort of in closed meetings is that you would use the word unpredictable, that nobody had a clue sort of what Donald Trump's foreign policy was going to be. Nobody knew how quickly he would change his mind from one subject to the other. We've seen indications within the U.S. administration with, for example, shuffles amongst his cabinet members. Steve Bannon, who was once his right-hand man, is now no longer on the National Security Council, and that happened very quickly. So we know that Donald Trump can change his mind very quickly. All the indications are, as far as this, this airstrike overnight, is that Donald Trump made that decision after seeing the images of so many young children who were essentially asphyxiated or subject to this terrible, terrible nerve agent that caused them to die in agonizing pain. And it comes simply down to that. The decision was made by Donald Trump, who, according to the sources at the White House, was deeply moved and deeply affected after seeing those images.
Mohammed Lila, who is CNN's correspondent in Istanbul. In breaking news, it's been reported that at least 4 Syrian soldiers were killed at the airbase targeted in those US strikes. That from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. 4 deaths, we are told, at this stage. I spoke with Prime Minister Bill English a short time ago. He told me he can understand how the US has ended up in this position.
We've seen the atrocities with the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government. The UN Security Council would be our preferred body to sort out these problems, but it's been unable to act at all on Syria or even condemn the atrocities. So the US is taking action. We support action that's proportionate to the requirement to stop further atrocities.
And do you think this is it? Do you think this is proportionate?
Well, on the face of it, it looks to be so far. Of course, it's concerning that the action has to be taken because there's real tensions in Syria.
The UN Security Council is your preferred organ, for want of a better word, for dealing with it. The problem is that Russia has the power of veto, right? So they are never, ever going to do what people might hope they would do. What else is available to the world to respond to Assad and what he's up to in Syria?
Well, look, I think that's why the US has taken this action. There really isn't much else available. I mean, New Zealand in its role on the Security Council was very assertively pushing and energetically pushing to get action, and I think quite frustrated. Well, we were quite frustrated that no action was taken.
We were on the record with that frustration, right? We were explicitly frustrated about that, and I think everyone other than Russia has been frustrated, haven't they?
I think that's the case, and that's why you ended up with this, with the US taking action.
Okay. Were you briefed?
Oh, we were advised that they were considering an airstrike through the Minister of Defence, and it happened that was a couple of hours ahead of the strike happening.
What next? Donald Trump has called for civilised nations to join him. He doesn't say how. Would New Zealand consider some kind of participation in some future action?
We haven't had any request to do so. Of course, if there was some request, we would consider it, but that doesn't prejudge any decision.
It's complex intervening in the Middle East, isn't it? And perhaps the example you would give of that is Iraq. So Saddam Hussein went, and what has followed has been a catastrophe. What do we do? What does the West do? What does the US do next to not create something similar to what happened in Iraq?
Look, if there was a clear answer to that, John, then the action so far would have been more effective. There's so much complexity, even to determine what success might look like in Syria, that we would be quite careful about taking any steps in that direction.
Bill English, he was also in Edgecombe today, and we'll hear from him about Edgecombe coming up shortly. Later on Checkpoint, we look at the risks attached to the strike. And according to Eric Pawlowski, there are some, and they're serious. Now, he was Special Assistant to President Obama, Senior Director for North Africa and Yemen at the White House. He was on the National Security Council, the Select Senate Intelligence Committee, and he was Senior Advisor to the US Permanent Representative to the UN. And he is our guest on Checkpoint after 6 tonight. Before we move on, what do the US people make of this? What do people in the US make of this? Well, of course, it depends where you ask in that sharply divided country. But Reuters went out in LA.
I really think it's crazy that he'll just retaliate so quick without thinking of repercussions, and I don't really think we should be doing anything over there.
All right. Well, I'm basically opposed to everything Donald Trump does. I feel horrible about the chemical attacks. I find hypocrisy on the right for denouncing what Obama had planned to do and rejecting Obama's move to do basically the same thing. I think it's a distraction from Trump's domestic issues, and it seems so far to be working from what I see in the press. So I think it'll last for a few days. Americans always get behind their leader in times of war, but I think it's a distraction from what's really facing us, which is his Russia situation.
Well, I mean, I know they did supposedly they did a chemical attack of some sort, so, I mean, I'm not sure he has the actual people that he needs to know whether or not they did it and whether or not the bombing is the right response. So I'd be curious to see what work went into that analysis before they actually went ahead and started bombing people. Because it's kind of a, hit first before you really kind of think about what's going on, reaction, which is what I'd be concerned about.
I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of that tricky situation where it's like, is the U.S. going to be responsible for horrible things that government's doing to their own people, I guess?
I don't think it's a really great idea to start a fighting campaign directly against Assad. Might be another way to get more peaceful resolutions, and I'm pretty sure that if we bomb them, it can drive to an escalation of even more violence in the area.
People on the streets of LA talking to Reuters. We'll be back with what's happening in Syria later in Checkpoint, 5:22. We go to Edgecombe now, where river levels are dropping. But the flooded Rangitaiki River is still flowing through the town. 1,600 people were evacuated yesterday when the river broke through the stop banks, flooding homes and turning streets into rivers themselves. Extraordinary scenes, you will have seen them. At least 200 people are still out. At least 2,000 others in the wider region have been isolated by floodwaters. Tonight we'll hear from residents who say they had just moments to evacuate, and we'll hear from farmers hard hit by the flooding and isolation. But first, let's go to our reporter, Zach Fleming, and our cameraman, Bradley White, in Edgecombe with the latest for us from Liveview.
Good evening, John. I'm as close to Edgecombe as you can possibly get at the moment. The entire town is still an exclusion zone. All 1,600 residents aren't allowed back in. I'm standing at one of the many roadblocks preventing them from getting back in. A steady trickle have tried through today to get through, only to be turned away by police. The stop bank on the edge of the Rangitaiki River is still broken. Water is still flooding into Edgecombe. The Prime Minister paid a visit today. He stood at the edge of the floodwaters at the top of town and surveyed the damage. Later, he was asked what the strongest image in his mind was from that visit.
Probably strongest from the evacuation centre here, just seeing people who have whose lives have been completely changed in the last 24 hours. So they left everything behind. They're not sure where they're staying tonight or tomorrow night. They're hearing that the flooding is ongoing, and they've got real uncertainty. And I think the other is just when you stand near where the breach is, seeing the river still running into the town, and as you look across the town, you can see from that point houses where the water is up around the windows, and it's still coming in. There's 900 empty households, and some of them, some proportion of them, no one will ever go back. So that's a complete loss. So I think there'll be significant damage. It's certainly come home to me coming here to see the scale of the impact.
And as anger builds here, Mr. English was also asked if there will be an independent inquiry.
Given the destruction, there's bound to be a range of opinions about how it was managed. But regardless of those opinions, as the Mayor said, there needs to be a full understanding of what happened, because this, remains a town that's on a floodplain, well, in a basin on a floodplain actually, and these issues are all pretty well understood in this area because of the long experience of the drainage of the Rangataiki Plains. So yeah, I'm sure there should be a full investigation into the whole thing, but we've got a lot of experience here to do that.
And the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's flood manager is Roger Waugh. He also spoke this morning.
So we're getting pumps in from all over the North Island. We'll have an operation going basically as soon as the river stops going into that area, and then pumping it out. So most of the water will need to be pumped out or put out through our canal system, our drainage system.
How long will that take?
1 to 2 weeks.
So as Roger Waugh said, it could be 1 to 2 weeks before the water is pumped out of Edgecombe, and locals I spoke to today aren't happy. In Whakatane, I met an extended family who have called Edgecombe their home their entire lives, and today they described the situation as devastating.
Worst part is the no warning. There was no warning, and like every other town was in state of emergency the night before except ours, and look.
No warning. Edgecombe resident Dee Hale Ridderford recalling the moment a wall of water flooded her home yesterday morning. She'd been at the gym just 10 minutes before.
I instantly just ran, got my gears, ran through the park. I was screaming to my family to get up and get out, but at the same time all I could see was policemen running across the road from the bank that had just bursted, and that's all the warning people had in the houses, just to get out. And that's kind of ridiculous. My dad, he just come off night shift, hour into his sleep. He heard me screaming. He got up and he said, "Oh, what's wrong, girl?" I said, "The bank's gone, Dad. We got to get out."
Watching YouTube videos in his bedroom was Dee's brother Elijah. Hearing his sister yelling, he jumped in the car.
And we reversed out and see my sister take off. We reversed out and we looked down the street further on down to where my cousin's house was. And there was just a big wave of water just floating down to come our way. And it was pretty scary, seeing that for the first time. It was kind of like a tsunami.
Dee and Elijah say their wider family has called Rata Street home for generations.
The hurtful part is knowing that my mum and dad's house is gone, but then I have family all along the whole street, our homestead, my auntie and her family's homestead. That's just the heartbreaking part.
It's pretty scary seeing that wave come down. It was
it's probably not something you're ever going to forget, is it?
Yeah, nah, it's going to be in my memory forever. Especially how it just broke our house that my dad just finished building. It's about to go on the market. It's a sad thing for us. And plenty of homes and all that, broken. All the people have to come here to survive for this moment of time now.
How old are you, Elijah?
I'm only 15. Go to school here at Trident. Yeah, but I ended up not going to school on that day because my gut had a feeling that wall was going to break. Sure enough, it did. Ended up flooding our whole town. That was pretty sad, especially though that our town's a little peaceful town, no gang-related stuff in that town. Nice and peaceful compared to all the rest of the towns.
Next door, Dee and Elijah's cousin Pux Hale was eating her breakfast when the water came.
I was sitting at the table having spaghetti and eggs for breakfast, and the water was just running down the road. It was pretty scary. My niece and nephew were at home, and they're only 4 and 5. No, it was not a good state when they're screaming and you're trying to calm them down, pick something up and try and get out of the house. Wasn't a very nice sight.
So you're sitting at a table eating spaghetti?
Yeah, I'm sitting here and the water's running past me over there in the back of the corner of my eye.
Did you have to kind of blink twice, do a bit of a double take?
Yeah, it was oh yeah, no, it's only just going down the road, and then next minute I was up our driveway, the backyard, the front yard, it was everywhere. It was just my car. I think the horn might be still going off at it in Edgecombe. The rubbish bins were smacking my car and the horn's going off and it's all underwater.
And another cousin, Mariwa Filippo, had just returned home from one of her 2 jobs.
By 8:25 to 9, we were underwater. Yeah, it happened so quick because we didn't get any warning. College Road got a little bit of a warning, but they just should have been monitoring that road, the river, and that bank, because it was actually broken in 2004. It had leaks in 2004 and they should have done something back then.
The cousins say their future is uncertain, and for now it's about family.
Yeah, a lot of sentimental stuff. Out that homestead's been my dad's homestead since he moved here years ago, over 50 years ago, so there's a lot of memories there. My auntie 2 houses over, my nan right next door, the neighbours next to us, they've been there since I was a little kid. People across the road have known us our whole lives. You just feel very, very sad for all the families that are there. We've got a strong community. I just wish the mayor had done something a bit earlier, because it's the first time we've seen him.
The Prime Minister said that some people might not even be able to go back to their homes. Some of them are going to be, they're going to have to be demolished. For you, you live, your whole family there's 4 houses around you.
Yeah.
What does that feel like for you?
Family? That won't be, that'll be pretty sad for us.
They've said that it may take 1 to 2 weeks to pump all the water out of Edgecombe. Where are you guys going to go?
At the moment there's about four families. We're all just bunking up in my dad's 3-bedroom house at the moment, and we already reached our limits for resources, I suppose, and that's by the river as well in Te Teko. So yeah, we're just making do with what we got, and we're just grateful that no one's died in the process.
In the meantime, Elijah says he's not sure when he'll return to school.
I'd rather just stick with my family, just in case something else happens, because I don't want to leave their side. It's like scary in those type of moments.
Kind of feel a bit fortunate, you want to keep them close by.
Yeah, I want to keep them close by because I don't want anything happening. So if something's going to happen to them, I'm going to go with them.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. After 6 tonight, Zach Fleming and our cameraman Bradley White go and talk to some farmers impacted by the floods. Coming up before 6, the cost of Edgecombe. We speak to the Insurance Council's Tim Grafton. MPs call for gang members and prospects to be banned from owning guns. And more. Very busy program tonight. Thank you for being with us. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose, particularly if you are in Edgecombe or you have opinions on Syria. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. However you are getting in touch with us, we appreciate your feedback. Thank you. It's 27.5 minutes to 6. Here's the headlines with Katrina.
The United States has launched missile strikes on a Syrian military airbase in retaliation for a chemical attack on civilians in the rebel-held town of Homs. President Donald Trump said it was in America's interest to prevent the spread and use of chemical weapons. He urged other countries to join the US to end the war in Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the airbase was almost completely destroyed by the attack and 4 Syrian soldiers have been killed. Prime Minister Bill English told Checkpoint the inability of the United Nations Security Council to take action against Syrian government atrocities has made the US strike necessary. He told John Campbell the government was advised that the US was considering the airstrike a couple of hours before it happened. The Bay of Plenty town of Edgecombe remains cordoned off, but authorities hope they can begin pumping out floodwaters tomorrow, a process that could take 2 weeks. Civil Defence says the water is likely to be contaminated with sewage, and the Ministry of Health will need to provide clearance before people can be allowed back. The Regional Council says as the floodwaters move down rivers and canals, people in low-lying areas northwest of Edgecombe could still have to leave their homes. MPs are calling for gang members and prospects to be banned from owning guns. A parliamentary select committee has recommended the move after a year-long inquiry into the illegal possession of firearms. Its report says the unlawful use of firearms is a core part of gang culture. The Labour MP, Stuart Nash, says people should lose the right to own a gun if they join a gang. Foreign students are boosting enrolment numbers at universities. 6 universities say they have more international students than at the same time last year, but only 2, Auckland and Canterbury, have grown their domestic enrolments. The falling number of school leavers combined with high employment is expected to cut domestic enrolments across the entire tertiary sector this year. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier, who's sitting beside me.
And it's Friday.
I was just saying to Nona before the news that your family can watch you in Canada, Nona.
That's right, they could.
Yeah.
But they'd have to stay up late.
Right.
Yeah. probably very
Well,
late.
I'm going to send them a note.
Okay.
And they could check in on how you're looking. You know. Okay, anyway. Look,
Never mind that.
Okay. We're turning to business news now. And my notes say Kiwi Property has a big plan for the town of Drury.
Yes.
Now, so Drury is just south of Auckland, right?
That's right. It's actually part of Auckland.
Yeah.
So it's South Auckland,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Right.
Because of the unitary plan,
Yeah,
so
right.
to speak. Yeah. Drury, the city has plans for Drury.
No. Kiwi Property has plans for Drury.
And Kiwi Property has
Oh,
plans
right.
for
Everyone's
Drury
got
too.
plans for Drury.
Everyone's got plans for Drury. Now they've got quite big plans. They've bought a 51-hectare piece of property in the town centre, and they're going to develop it. And they're going to build a town, basically a town centre that complements the existing one over the next 20 years.
Right. This is a satellite city, as much discussed, isn't it, in the
Yeah.
Auckland mayoralty campaign?
Well, it's been talked about. So they bought this. They bought 2 parcels first up for $40 million, and then they've got an option on a second piece. The market price there hasn't been decided yet because that's in the future.
So what are they putting there? They're obviously putting residential in. Because
they're going to do residential, but they're not necessarily going to build it themselves. They're more interested in commercial, and one of the things they're interested in.
So commercial provides, hopefully, local jobs, right? Which means those poor buggers don't have to get onto the southern motorway to get into town to go to work.
Well, that won't be a problem because they want to build a rail station there too.
What with?
Well, hey, we're talking about a long time frame here.
Yeah.
I spoke with the chief executive. He thought 10 years in the planning. It will take about 10 years to plan it all out, another 10 years to kind of build it out. And he says there will be lots of jobs earmarked for that area according to the plan, as well as housing. I think something like 8,000 houses are earmarked for that area, 5,000 jobs.
Holy moly.
So big development going up in that area.
And where are they? So I'm just springing this on you because we've had such a busy day that we haven't had our usual preliminary discussion.
That's right.
But where are they at with resource consents and all that kind of stuff?
They just started.
Okay.
That's like all they have right now is an idea.
So this is like a letter to Santa, isn't it? Dear Santa,
Dear Santa,
we want Drury.
We want Drury. Well, I'm sure if I lived in Drury, I'd be looking forward to a new town. Maybe not. I don't know.
No, maybe you live in Drury because you don't want town.
Well, too late.
Okay, thanks, Nona.
Too late.
What else is happening?
Actually, you have time to move. 20 years. It's
Yeah.
a long time. Come on. Okay, what else is happening? Oh, well, a little bit of an update. Again, speaking of Kiwi Property, they have made a proposal to a company called NPT. We've talked about them before.
Yeah.
Another big development in
This
that.
is pistols at dawn stuff, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
There's going to be a meeting, showdown, maybe I should call it, on April 21st. And I spoke with Chris Gudgeon. He's going to be at the meeting, but he says it's really up to NPT. They made a proposal to take over the management of NPT in a deal which 2 of the major shareholders thought was not an advantage to NPT's smaller retail shareholders. That's the small mom and pop types. They're saying that it will dilute the value of NPT if they do this deal. So it's a good deal for Kiwi Property. No one's criticizing them. They're saying that the board of NPT are making a big mistake in recommending this and wanting to go forward. Augusta Capital, which is a fund management property company, it really wanted to offer the same kind of a deal that Kiwi did, but NPT was not interested. So you know what Augusta's done?
Nope.
They've doubled their shareholding in the company today.
Right, what's been the reaction to that?
Well, the share price went up.
Yeah, I bet it
I could
did.
say it did. It went up 8%. So
Right.
that's a big hike. 8% to 64 cents, that's 6 cents. So that's quite a lot. And of course, Kiwi Property share price, it's done well as, up 2 cents, $1.43. So overall, they moved against the market, as a matter of fact. The top 50 index ended the day down 2/3. So that's
No, it didn't end.
2/3 of a percent. I was about to finish.
But ended down 2/3. We should have led with that.
Oh, wow, that would have been great. Big story. Would have taken Syria off the top, right? No, 2/3 of a percent by 46 points to 7,244. And that breaks an 8-day streak. So we're still at a 6-month high. It's very high. Not as high as it was yesterday, but, no, it's still up there. Now, the New Zealand dollar, it's steady at 69.7 US cents, 92.6 Australian, and 55.9 pence. Everyone's waiting to find out what Donald Trump and the Chinese president come up with this
That's
weekend.
fascinating. Thanks, Nona. We really appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
And you.
Nona Peltier, our Auckland-based business reporter. What next for Edgecombe is a very big question. It will be days before people can return to their homes, weeks at best before some people will be able to live in them again, and local businesses will get their income from where over the next days and weeks. Now, Deanna Tubb and her family live in Edgecombe. They were evacuated from their home, which they hope and pray is okay. And by coincidence, her parents were staying at the Awakeri hot springs nearby, so they all went there. But then when our producer Bridget Burke called her this morning...
Hi Bridget, we can't talk. We've just been informed that the dam is bursting. We're having to evacuate from where we are.
Where are you?
We're currently right in the path of the dam. We're not 100% sure of what is going on, but we're just being told to get out.
Now, the dam wasn't bursting, of course, but the false alarm is perhaps indicative. People are unsure of what's happening, uncertain about their futures, exhausted and completely on edge, which is what Deanna told us when she called us back a few minutes later.
We're not getting a hell of a lot of information through. It's becoming very frustrating for our safety, of course. So we're currently in the process of moving and going inland towards Whakatane at this point.
So where are you now?
I am currently situated at the Awakeri hot springs. I just know that we're in a danger zone if the breach occurs.
It's extraordinary that you're in a danger zone there, isn't it? Because you're not,
it really is.
You're not right by the river, so the water's just coming over farmland now, is it?
It basically is. The water, we understand, hasn't actually come from the direct breach yesterday. It's actually coming in off the farmland around us.
I've been speaking to people who are saying it's actually coming up through the land.
Which doesn't surprise me, John. We are on reclaimed marshland down here in the Rangitoki Plains. Our water table was naturally quite high anyway.
Right. So in fact, there's flooding beneath you, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And look, I mean, you sound like a person who's kind of a bit spent, and it's I sense that it's just because you don't know what's happening and what to do and what's going to happen next.
That's exactly it. We just don't know. We're hoping and praying for the best. At this point, we're all thankful that there's been no loss of life, and that while, from what I'm feeling right now, there was some mismanagement yesterday in the morning.
In what way? What do you think it was?
Well, there's the good old rumour mill, small town rumour mill, and they were just saying that they saw the breaches early hours of the morning coming through the concrete, which none of this is confirmed. This is just, good old small town New Zealand talk, and that we should have been warned a hell of a lot earlier that she was looking like she was going to go.
It's just so big, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And we're just all tired, I guess, because I can probably say that most of us haven't had much sleep.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, you didn't know what was going to happen overnight, right? You didn't, and there's been more evacuations this morning, and so who knew whether they were even going to be able to stay in their home?
We've just managed to suss ourselves somewhere to stay tonight. And we will sit down together and regroup. And we heard yesterday that Westpac is offering people mortgagee holidays. So we're with Kiwibank, so we're hoping that the banks will come out and do that for everyone.
Because at the moment, no one's going to come to your business, right?
Oh, no one's going to come to the town. I am scared for our lovely little piece of paradise here, to be honest, and what it might do for us.
Deanna Tubb, a very proud and passionate Edgecombe resident. What will the cost of this be in terms of infrastructure, in terms of lost business income, and most of all in terms of damaged and destroyed properties, private and commercial, and lost possessions? Tim Grafton from the Insurance Council is expecting the total cost of claims to be significant.
It looks like fairly substantial damage will have been incurred, so this is going to be certainly in the multi-millions of dollars just for Edgecombe.
Yeah, and the number of evacuations and therefore presumably claims elsewhere is rising. Look, I've been speaking to people who are worried that while they have insurance and their insurance company is going to pay out on this event, after two serious and very similar floods in the space of 13 years, that the insurance companies will do what they have to do this time around and then walk away from Edgecombe. Should people be concerned about that?
I wouldn't want people who are Edgecombe residents to be unduly concerned about the availability of insurance after this event. What I have read, and I would still need to know whether it's actually factually accurate, but this was been reported as a 1 in 500 year event. So something of that rarity would not give rise to concern. It would be frequent events of this nature that would give rise to concern. And that's not the case here. What insurers may want to look at in the immediate future is the rebuild of the stop banks so that there isn't risk to the town over the near future, and if there was another downpour, so there might be reluctance on taking on new risks in that town at the moment, but existing insured people will be fine.
I think there are lots of broader issues here, and we spoke some months ago about South Dunedin, for example, and its vulnerability to rising sea levels as a result of climate change, and you indicated a desire to see councils work much harder to mitigate risk if they can, reduce risk if they can from these kinds of events.
And these conversations have been well underway. I mean, with local government New Zealand, we are pretty much on the same page in terms of the need to manage risks and de-risk the future. So that involves a whole bunch of different and complex issues around whether or not you fund resilience now, and that's a cost borne by today's ratepayers to benefit tomorrow's. So there's intergenerational equity issues around what you might do, the kind of consents that you might make for future developments. So the last place you'd be providing development consent should be on a floodplain. And so there's a whole range of things that we're already having discussions about, and they're becoming more intense, and the councils increasingly around the country becoming more focused on how they plan for the future.
Tim Grafton from the Insurance Council talking to us earlier today. It's coming up to 13 minutes to 6. MPs are calling for gang members and prospects to be banned from owning guns. A parliamentary select committee has recommended the move after a year-long inquiry into the illegal possession of firearms. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
Dennis O'Reilly is a life member of Black Power and a social activist who's been advising governments on gang matters since Sir Robert Muldoon was Prime Minister. He used to have a gun licence, and though he doesn't want one now, he doesn't see why his gang membership should bar him from getting one.
It's prejudice, I suppose. I think it would be better to have the test of the law, and if someone has committed a crime, that makes them unworthy of having a gun, and it doesn't matter whether they're a member of the JCs or the Salvation Army or whatever.
The report says the unlawful use of firearms is a core part of gang culture. But Mr O'Reilly says the politicians are just demonising gang members to drum up support in election year.
You take your eye off the ball and we start looking for aliens or something or other. I mean, does this mean that every Muslim shouldn't have a gun? No, it's a stupid thing, but it's analogous to it, you know?
A gang expert and sociologist, Jared Gilbert, doesn't think banning gang members from owning guns will do much to combat crime. He too suspects it's politically motivated.
If you're a hunter and you're in a gang and there's been no problems in the past, suddenly you become criminalised. Well, I don't know what's changed overnight. Membership alone doesn't make you criminal.
But such arguments find little sympathy with the Labour MP Stuart Nash.
By and large, the gangs are the main perpetrators of criminal activity. We say if you want to own a firearm, get out of the gang. If they're keen hunters, they will have to make a choice on whether they want to remain in the gang or they want to remain a keen hunter.
And the Police Association's president, Chris Cahill, is on board.
Gang members shouldn't be entitled to have firearms. It's a privilege, not a right. They only use them to break the law. We know of gang members who have got firearms licences, who have bought firearms and then supplied them through to other gang members who have used them for illegal means. So every little step will make a difference.
The report also recommends allowing police to ban people deemed high risk from owning firearms or being in the company of people who do. It suggests police start building up a firearms registry by recording serial numbers as people renew their licences. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Rising numbers of international students are bolstering student numbers at most universities. A drop in the number of school leavers and a rise in employment was expected to lead to a big fall in domestic enrolments. That was expected to cut about 5,000 students from across the tertiary education sector. But while most polytechnics have seen a decrease, university student numbers are mostly being bolstered by a rise in international students. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen filed this report.
Universities have been offering a lot more scholarships and fee deals in recent years as they compete for a shrinking number of school leavers. Among them is Canterbury University, which is trying to rebuild enrolments after the 2011 earthquake cut student numbers from more than 15,000 full-time students to less than 12,000. This year it's aiming for nearly 13,000 students, and the university's Director of Student Services, Lynn McClelland, says it's enrolled nearly 500 more than at the same time last year.
It looks as though we're up just over 4% overall, and that includes an increase of around 3% in domestic students and 20% in full-fee students.
Lynn McClelland says the number of full-fee foreign students is almost back to pre-quake levels. She says there's a range of factors encouraging more students to choose the university.
There's an element of housing affordability in Christchurch which has eased. The city itself is coming back into full recovery mode and is much more vibrant and dynamic than it perhaps has been in recent years. We've worked very hard to put forward our proposition to students and to deliver the kind of student experience that they really want to have during their time at university.
Massey University has nearly 300 more international enrolments, but about 250 fewer domestic enrolments than a year ago. Its Vice-Chancellor Jan Thomas says the falling number of school leavers is probably driving the drop in domestic students.
Well, it's a little early in the year to be sure about where our numbers will fall, but I do know that there is a fairly flat domestic market here in New Zealand in terms of school leaver numbers, and that will be influencing the numbers coming on to universities, including Massey.
At the University of Waikato, the Director of Marketing and Recruitment, Simon Bush, says the expected slump in school leaver enrolments hasn't materialised.
Our school leaver numbers are relatively strong. We were expecting it to be a tough year for school leavers this year, but we've managed to come through okay. What we aren't too sure on yet is whether we're finding that the sort of Year 13 students who are out there, whether they're increasingly choosing to go to university. That might be happening.
Overall, Waikato's enrolments are about the same as last year, with slightly fewer domestic students and slightly more internationals. Lincoln and Victoria universities also have slightly more students than a year ago, and the University of Auckland has over 500 more enrolments, thanks to more domestic and international students. Otago University and Auckland University of Technology would not provide figures, saying it was too early in the year. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
We're going to return to Edgecombe now, where farmers raced into action today helping others whose properties have been isolated or swamped in flood waters. A call for help over a local radio station attracted a response from far and wide after a canal burst its banks on Gow Road this morning, forcing the evacuation of families and stock. Some farmers are now considering drying their stock off early rather than sending them to higher ground, but they do have real concerns about the canals breaching in the coming days. Earlier today, our reporter Zach Fleming and our cameraman Bradley White visited the Awaiti Canal and spoke to farmer Matt Gow.
The canals that run through and alongside the farms just on the outskirts of Edgecombe are swollen. They're swollen because of the deluge that happened this week, and they're swollen because farmers are pumping water into them from their farms in efforts to keep them dry. But farmers say the main thing that's causing them to be swollen is because the stop bank in Edgecombe hasn't been plugged yet. The water from the Rangitiki River that's flooding into Edgecombe, they say, is coming here, into these canals and onto their farms. They didn't want to speak to me on camera, but they're angry. They're angry that that stop bank hasn't been plugged yet, because they say if it's not plugged soon, these canals are going to flood over onto their farms. Some of them are trying to evacuate their cows off their farms in efforts to try and save them. That's how worried they are that these canals are going to burst.
I'm fourth generation here, so early 1920s.
And the problem we have now, how bad is that compared to what you've seen?
I've been back for just over 20 years, and it's the first time the Rangitaki's come over this side of the river. So. Certainly the first time I know that Edgecombe's been affected the way it has, and it's going to be. Everyone's learning where the river's going. Like we know now, but over the last 24 hours it's a bit of guesswork.
The problem that you guys have specifically, if we forget about Edgecombe for a minute, I know that's not easy to do, but what's going on down here?
There are probably about 500 metres away from us, there are farms that are completely underwater. All those farms have had their stock and people evacuated over the last 12 hours.
we're just on our farm here. We're okay at this stage. We're just looking at options. We do need to get rid of stock or dry cows off, and we've kind of elected that, if we're sending cows away for 3 weeks and someone else is getting the milk from them, and then we bring them back, and we're going to be drying them off anyway, so we're just going to be drying them off now and battening down the hatches, and hopefully we don't get any wetter.
Can you talk to me about the canals though? What's the problem? What's the risk that might happen?
The canals are holding out all right at the moment. They're all full. There's a little bit of breaching in different places, but yeah, the problem is that the rangatike is now entering other catchment areas, and from here on in, a lot of the water that's come through Edgecombe is coming across farmland, and it's just going down the catchment area, and the further down you go, it's almost definite that all that water has to go through flood pumps from here on in.
So you say through flood pumps because these are areas of land that it doesn't drain away, it has to be physically pumped out?
Yep, they're all kind of at sea level type areas, and all those areas have to be pumped. Yeah.
It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, we had it back in 2004, but on the other side of the river, and it's pretty awesome how the community comes together and everyone gets their tractors and pumps, and the network gets going, and it seems to work. It's unfortunately, it is a bit of a drama at the time, but it is water, and hopefully we can get rid of it.
It's a drama that is unfortunately kind of out of your control. It's one of those frustrating situations. What do you need from civil defence or the government, or what do you need to try and fix this or stop this from getting any worse? I think the priority, and I think it is from the people that powers that be, is to try and plug up the hole in Edgecombe. It's just stopping that water and directing as much water as possible just to get out to sea, and it's just a matter of draining all the flooded areas one way or another. I think everyone's been doing a pretty awesome job of, there's been a lot of people from out of town coming to help out, or from civil defence and things like that, and I think they've, from what I know of it, they've handled it pretty well considering they don't know the territory around here, and everyone's just chipping in and getting on top.
Matt Gale talking to Zach Fleming. Extraordinary to, when you start to explore these places, there is a Gow Road, I think it's Gow Road or Gow Street in Edgecombe, and that family is all along it. The Gowes have been there for generations and they farm right through Edgecombe. Matt, one of them. Fonterra has replied with a statement. The river level has dropped overnight and we had planned to begin reopening our plant in Edgecombe. It's right on the side of the river, just almost directly across from the town. However, new information about the state of the nearby flood bank has delayed our intended restart. We will continue to assess the situation, but the welfare of our staff, farmers and animals remains our priority. Our local farm source store will remain closed due to the flooding. Approximately 40 of our local farms are impacted by the flooding. The co-op is supporting those farmers as much as possible. We've fielded a huge number of calls from nearby farmers with offers of help managing stock and support from the Edgecombe community. Where we collect milk off the farm, it's being redirected to our manufacturing sites in the Waikato. Coming up to 6 o'clock, just before we go there, this report from Lisa Doucette about the Basque militant group ETA, which has announced it will hand over its weapons this weekend, but warns its enemies might still block the process. Spain still refuses to negotiate with the group, of course. Lisa Doucette has filed this report from San Sebastian in Basque Country.
When you come here to the heart of San Sebastian, it's hard to imagine. This was once the heartland of ETA. For decades, a place of bombings, extortion, assassinations, a time where former ETA members tell us they were literally fighting for Basque independence. Others say it was a time of pervasive fear, a time when thousands of bodyguards and special forces had to be deployed across this region and in the Basque region of France to try to keep security. The human costs are incalculable. Thousands of people, many of them women and children, were either killed or injured in ETA's violence. And on the other side, nearly 400 prisoners are still in jails in France and Spain, far from their families, serving life sentences. Everyone here has a story. But the story now is that ETA says it is unilaterally giving up its guns. And that's because the French and Spanish governments tell them they will get nothing in return. In some senses, the move is symbolic. There hasn't been violence here in Spain by ETA for many years. And years ago, ETA unilaterally announced a ceasefire. But what this new move means is that the last insurgency in Europe is coming to an end. Basque politicians and their supporters say they will continue to fight for independence, but with very different means.
The BBC's Lisa Doucette.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The United States President says he was compelled to act after a deadly chemical attack on a rebel-held town in Syria. On Donald Trump's orders, 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from warships in the Mediterranean at a Syrian government airbase. A human rights group says 4 Syrian soldiers were killed and the base has been almost completely destroyed. The provincial governor says civilian casualties have been reported in a nearby village. The US strike was in retaliation for an apparent chemical weapons attack that killed more than 80 people in Idlib province earlier this week. Mr. Trump says there can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons.
It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons.
Donald Trump says previous attempts at changing the behaviour of the Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad have failed. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says the government believes the US action is proportionate.
On the face of it, it looks to be so far. Of course, it's concerning that the action has to be taken because there's real tensions in Syria.
Mr. English says the government was briefed about the missile strike a few hours before it took place. The floodwaters which have inundated Edgecombe are contaminated with sewage and there's a possibility of more evacuations. The Rangataiki River breached a stop bank yesterday, forcing the evacuation of the entire Bay of Plenty town. With the water still flowing, there could be more evacuations to the northwest of Edgecombe and more property left underwater. The Whakatane Mayor, Tony Bond, says work has started repairing the stock bank breach. Mr. Bond says the sewage system is not working, so surface water is likely to be contaminated, and people in the entire Ruatoki and Rangataiki plains must boil all their water.
This means that people in these areas should bring water to a rapid boil for at least 1 minute to make the water safe to drink, and the areas affected of Titeko, Mapo, Edgecombe, Arakiri and Braemar supplies.
Tony Bond says people are still isolated in Minganui, Ruatahuna, Te Whaiti and Ruatoki, and emergency supplies are being delivered by air. And more properties across 500 hectares in Bay of Plenty could be evacuated as floodwaters move to lower ground. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council flood manager, Roger Waugh, says properties to the northwest of Edgecombe towards the Awaiti Canal and up near Thornton and Matata roads are at most risk.
The floodwaters are migrating down to the lower areas and into the lower canals. There are issues as it goes through there. There's likely to be maybe some other evacuations. There'll be other property affected, and of course obviously it's a farming community, so there's obviously stock and the dairy operation that's being affected.
Roger Waugh says the water may not reach those areas, but residents should stay on high alert. An Edgecombe resident says people in the small town are unsure of what's happening and uncertain about their futures. It could be days or weeks before some are able to return to their houses. Deanna Tubb and her family were evacuated from their home. Ms Tubb says people are thankful there has been no loss of life but feel exhausted and on edge.
We're not getting a hell of a lot of information through. It's becoming very frustrating for our safety, of course.
Deanna Tubb says she stayed overnight with her parents at Awakeri Hot Springs, but that's also in the danger zone and she will have to move again. A Black Power Life member and social activist has criticised a proposal to ban gang members from owning guns, calling it unfair discrimination. A parliamentary select committee has recommended the move after a year-long inquiry into the illegal possession of firearms. But Dennis O'Reilly says it's unfair to treat all gang members as criminals.
It's prejudice, I suppose. I think we'd be better to have the test of the law, and if someone has committed a crime, that makes them unworthy of having a gun. And it doesn't matter whether they're a member of the JCs or the Salvation Army or whatever.
Dennis O'Reilly says the politicians are just demonising gang members to drum up support in election year. Auckland health authorities say 3 people are still in hospital following the city's typhoid outbreak. 2 people are in Auckland City Hospital and another is at Waitakere Hospital. A woman who had typhoid died at Auckland City Hospital last month. The Auckland Regional Public Health Service says the number of confirmed typhoid cases is unchanged at 18, with 1 probable case and 2 more under investigation. All are connected to a Samoan Assembly of God church group. The health service is monitoring the people considered at highest risk of contracting the illness. It's 6:05. To sport, there'll be no subtlety to the New South Wales Waratahs' approach in tonight's Super Rugby match against the defending champions, the Hurricanes in Wellington. With no Australian side having beaten a New Zealand team this year, the Hurricanes will be chasing a bonus point win to stay in touch with the pace-setting Chiefs and Crusaders. The Waratahs have won on 3 of their last 4 visits to Wellington, and the home side expect them to follow the same game plan of 2 years ago when the Waratahs demolished them in the forwards with their physicality. The All Black Sevens side has suffered a major setback ahead of the Hong Kong leg of the World Series, which starts tonight, with captain Scott Curry ruled out with the flu. Veteran DJ Forbes will take over the captaincy while Sam Dixon replaces Curry in the 12-strong squad. New Zealand currently sit 4th in the overall standings with their first match against Wales at 11:30 tonight. With the world's best golfer pulling out of the first round of the US Masters, unheralded Charlie Hoffman has turned the tournament on its head. The American, who's ranked outside the world's top 50, shot a 7-under par 65 in a windswept first round at Augusta, finishing 4 shots clear of his nearest rival. The world number 1, Dustin Johnson, withdrew just moments before he was due to tee off due to a back injury. And the defender Ali Riley has been named as the new captain of the New Zealand women's football team, replacing Abby Urseg. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, our growing understanding of the great white shark. What's made Tokoya Schmidt climb mountains? An activity that killed her father and her brother. An historian takes a revisionist view of Martin Luther. And actor Bill Nighy talks about, well, whatever he likes. He's Bill Nighy. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Waikato and Coromandel Peninsula. Showers gradually clearing from the south today and becoming fine. However, a few showers returning north of Whangaparaoa tomorrow. Waitomotu Kapiti Coast, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country, fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, a few showers developing about Gisborne and the Wairoa district tomorrow. Wellington and Wairarapa, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from some areas of cloud this evening and tomorrow morning. Canterbury mainly fine, however cloud and patchy drizzle this evening and tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland fine apart from showers about southern Bulla and northern Westland tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers spreading north this afternoon, then becoming mainly fine, and the Chatham Islands showers clearing tomorrow. It's 6:08 exactly and you're listening to Checkpoint.
On Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons. There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons, violated its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and ignored the urging of the UN Security Council. Years of previous attempts at changing Assad's behavior have all failed, and failed very dramatically. As a result, the refugee crisis continues to deepen, and the region continues to destabilize, threatening the United States and its allies. Tonight I call on all civilized nations to join us in seeking to end the slaughter and bloodshed in Syria, and also to end terrorism of all kinds and all types. We ask for God's wisdom as we face the challenge of our very troubled world. We pray for the lives of the wounded and for the souls of those who have passed. And we hope that as long as America stands for justice, then peace and harmony will, in the end, prevail. Good night, and God bless America and the entire world. Thank you.
That was US President Donald Trump a few hours ago explaining why he ordered missile strikes against a Syrian airfield. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the missile attack had almost completely destroyed the Syrian airbase and killed 4 soldiers, including an officer. Iran has strongly condemned the attack, while a senior Russian lawmaker says its coalition with the United States on the Syrian crisis is now in doubt. Both support the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And President Trump now faces his biggest foreign policy crisis since taking office. Our US correspondent Harry Horton joins us now from Washington. Harry, it's wonderful to have you with us as always. Thank you for being up so late. What has been the reaction from outside those who knew it was going to come? So beyond the White House and beyond the Pentagon, what are people saying about this in the US?
Well, the reaction from Congress has been broadly supportive. We're told that around a dozen members of Congress were briefed by the White House before this action took place. They were aware of it. But other than that, I think Congress will be looking to learn from the White House what their legal justification was for this airstrike. But as I say, broadly speaking, most members of Congress broadly supportive. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he said this action was appropriate and just. The Assad regime can no longer count on American inaction. John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who are 2 kind of foreign policy hawks in the US Senate, they've both put out statements very quickly after the airstrike welcoming it. Democrats on Capitol Hill too, they're welcoming this news. Chuck Schumer, who's the chief Democrat in the Senate, he said that this was a good action, but he did say it's now incumbent on the Trump administration to come forward to Congress with what its plan is towards Syria. So I think that's what we'll see in the coming weeks now from other politicians, is they'll want the White House to come up with a clear strategy towards Syria, because that's one thing we haven't seen so far from the White House.
Harry, Trump has been such a vociferous opponent on the record, on Twitter, against Obama. Anyone who would listen has heard his opinion on intervention in Syria. What swayed it? Are we really to believe that he saw those pictures from the chemical attack on the village and had such an overwhelming sense of repugnance that this is the sole reason for this response?
Well, that's certainly what the White House are saying. They say that President Trump genuinely did have a change of mind when he saw those images from that apparent chemical weapons attack earlier this week. But the White House also being very clear that this is an example of how President Trump is prepared to take decisive action. The words tonight from Rex Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, were that, look, President Assad has crossed a line and President Trump has taken decisive action. And that's clearly a reference to the language that President Obama used back in 2013 when he talked about crossing a red line and then failed to back that up with US military action. So, you know, clearly the White House wanting to show here that Trump is prepared to take decisions. And it shouldn't be lost on people that this is all going on as President Trump is meeting with President Xi Jinping of China down in Florida, and they're going to be discussing North Korea. So Trump can certainly come forward here and say, look, you know, when I make these threats, I'm prepared to follow them up.
Yes, there's so much riding on that meeting. What are expectations, what are hopes about what will be achieved between the two presidents?
Well, certainly top of the agenda for Donald Trump is trade and North Korea. There's been a suggestion that he might use trade with China and this trade deficit that currently exists as some sort of bargaining chip to try and persuade China to do more, to put pressure on North Korea to kind of close down its nuclear program. It's unclear how successful he's going to be in that. Certainly the rhetoric from the White House all week has been talking up this threat from North Korea. Of course, we saw those missile strikes from North Korea earlier this week. But I think the news from the past few hours, these Syrian airstrikes really overshadow everything now. This is going to be the topic that President Trump will be questioned about most tomorrow, and the thoughts about trade really are at the back of everyone's mind down in Florida.
Thanks, Harry. Harry Horton, live from Washington. We really appreciate it. Harry joining us live there. Eric Pawlowski was Special Assistant President Obama, Senior Director for North Africa and Yemen at the White House. He was on the National Security Council, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and was Senior Advisor to the US Permanent Representative to the UN. And what he knows is that Western interventions in the Middle East almost invariably have consequences few in the West predicted or perhaps wanted. Are there, I asked him, the risks of such consequences here?
It's a great question. I think we don't know how many risks we took on yet. We can only speculate, but I think along several predictable lines. One, did the Syrian government lose people tonight? Did Lebanese Hezbollah lose people tonight? And the third concern is, did the Russians lose anybody tonight? Now, the reports coming in suggest that we did what we could to minimize casualties by the timing and the nature of the attack. But obviously, any three of those categories could decide to respond, and they can do it symmetrically, in other words, attacking us in Syria or responding in Syria, or they can do it asymmetrically outside of Syria where we're not looking for a response from them. And more importantly, we have an ongoing conflict inside Syria against Daesh, against the Islamic State. And if the Syrians decide what we did tonight should not interfere with that, then that's obviously a good thing. But if they decide that their air defenses ought to start paying close attention to what our airplanes are doing against the Islamic State, then we have a real problem. So there are lots of different ways in which this could play out dangerously for U.S. interests and frankly, the international community's interests.
It's Eric Pawlowski. I spoke to him a short time ago. I spoke with Prime Minister Bill English a short time ago too. He told me he can understand how the US ended up in this position after the chemical attacks, but
the UN Security Council would be our preferred body to sort out these problems, but it's been unable to act at all on Syria or even condemn the atrocities. So the US is taking action. We support action that's proportionate to the requirement to stop further atrocities.
And do you think this is it? Do you think this is proportionate?
Well, on the face of it, it looks to be so far. Of course, it's concerning that the action has to be taken because there's real tensions in Syria.
The UN Security Council is your preferred organ, for want of a better word, for dealing with it. The problem is that Russia has the power of veto, right? So they are never, ever going to do what people might hope they would do. What else is available to the world to respond to Assad and what he's up to in Syria?
Well, look, I think that's why the US has taken this action. There really isn't much else available. I mean, New Zealand in its role on the Security Council was very assertively pushing and energetically pushing to get action, and I think quite frustrated. Well, we were quite frustrated that no action was taken.
We were on the record with that frustration, right? We were explicitly frustrated about that, and I think everyone other than Russia has been frustrated, haven't they?
I think that's the case, and that's why you ended up with this, with the US taking action.
Okay. Were you briefed?
Oh, we were advised that they were considering an airstrike through the Minister of Defence, and it happened that was a couple of hours ahead of the strike happening.
What next? Donald Trump has called for civilised nations to join him. He doesn't say how. Would New Zealand consider some kind of participation in some future action?
We haven't had any request to do so. Of course, if there was some request, we would consider it, but that doesn't prejudge any decision.
It's complex intervening in the Middle East, isn't it? And perhaps the example you would give of that is Iraq. So Saddam Hussein went, and what has followed has been a catastrophe. What do we do? What does the West do? What does the US do next to not create something similar to what happened in Iraq?
Look, if there was a clear answer to that, John, then the action so far would have been more effective. There's so much complexity, even to determine what success might look like in Syria, that we would be quite careful about taking any steps in that direction.
Busy old day for you. You've been in Edgecombe. I know you're in the north now, aren't you? But you've been in Edgecombe. What did you see there?
Oh, look, some pretty serious problems for people in that town. I mean, the water is still running into the town. It's completely emptied out. 900 households, I think 1,600 people have gone. A deathly silence there. And I met a number of the people who were, understandably distressed as the reality sinks in. Most of them don't know the state of their houses because they left the town. They haven't seen it as recently as I have. But from what I could see, a number of them will not be going back to live in their houses because they'll be severely damaged by a couple of metres of water going through their house. Others will be able to go back, and I think it's while the insurance issues will get going and the issues of the challenges of the physical cleanup, top priority is going to be getting as much certainty as possible for these 900 households and effective communication so they know what can happen to them if they can get home or not.
Yeah. In terms of effective communication, do you think enough was done yesterday morning to tell people that they were about to be flooded like this?
The impression I have, that these things will be examined in retrospect, but the impression I have is that swift action was required and taken. This was a river that has in stop banks that have dealt with 1 in 100-year floods before, and the 1 in the 500-year flood has caused all this problem.
Obviously, people have private insurance. Some people won't. What is the government looking at in terms of assistance for people who are really crippled by this?
Well, look, in the first instance, we'll have to focus on the accommodation requirements. So most of the people who've moved out have dispersed through the community, but that's not a permanent answer for anyone, and they will want certainty anyway. So what the insurance issues will arise. There's probably going to be people there who aren't insured or for whom it's had a huge impact, and we want to get alongside as they're starting to set up the system to do this in Whakatane, get alongside the individual households to work through their immediate issues, and then if the long-term one is lack of insurance, well, we'll have to deal with that then.
Bill English talking to us a short time ago. It's Friday night and we're going to end tonight with a New Zealand musician for whom exciting things are happening. She's been signed to 4AD, the label that's given the world Bauhaus, The Birthday Party, Bon Iver, The National Stereolab, This Mortal Coil and many more. She's Aldous Harding. She's from Christchurch. She's currently touring the US and Europe. Her music is intense. The Guardian called her bewitching, deeply affecting, and a folk artist whose performances strike that rare balance between fragility and full-blown possession. Her album, produced by PJ Harvey's producer, is due out in May, and we're really delighted to say that she came in to perform the title track of that album for us in the studio next door. Here recorded by Andre Upston, shot by Claire Easton Farrelly, and with Jonathan Pearce on keyboard, Tristan Deck on percussion, and Callum Passels on bass clarinet, is Aldous Harding performing Party.
He took me to a just 12, with his thumb in my mouth. I was as happy as I will ever be. Believe in me, I will never break from you. If there is a party, will you wait for me? I felt slow on the journey you planned. I was ashamed when you yelled my name. Stones smell good when you cuddle them, all in a stack. I was as happy as I will ever be. Believe in me, I will never break from you. If there is a party, will you wait for me? I warned him of the journey I'd planned, the doom I felt, and the death I smelled. I see now that he understands it cannot be helped. I was as happy as I will ever be. Believe in me, I will never break from you. If there is a party, will you wait for me? If there is a party,
It's a bit of a treat. That's Aldous Harding performing her song Party to end the week, which recorded for us in the studio next door on behalf of our wonderful, excellent, brilliant and hard-working team with whom I am so proud to work. And let's have a shot of the youngsters, the boys in the studio. Have a wonderful weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. At least 4 Syrian soldiers are reported to have been killed and an airbase almost completely destroyed by an American missile attack. Russia says the attack has done significant damage to US-Russian ties. More Bay of Plenty properties could be evacuated as floodwaters move to lower ground. MPs are calling for gang members and prospects to be banned from owning guns, and foreign students are boosting enrolments at universities as the number of school leavers falls. Our next news and weather is at 7. This is Trending Now. Focus on politics is later, but first from Tuesday. The Opportunities Party leader, Gareth Morgan, has set the cat among the pigeons once again with forthright social media comments about freedom campers. Responding to Tourism Minister Paula Bennett's reluctance to charge tourists to cover the cost of cleaning up after them, Mr Morgan took to Twitter. He spoke with Guy Nespiner on Morning Report.